match taking place between catask and doganswer. And if we look at the overall standings, we find, if we look at the game percentage, catask at the top and doganswer at the bottom. So I expect this to be a clear victory for catask. I see that catask is online and we'll be following him. The players are seated. As you can see, catask has a whopping 500, almost 500 point ELO lead. They're playing 10 games regardless of the outcome. And we see a d4, d5 line here. And catask choosing the popular kingside fianchetto setup. Let's see what doganswer has prepared. He seems to be moving quickly here, so he must have anticipated the kingside fianchetto. So this is a rather passive knight, so no wonder black wants to trade it for the active bishop on d3, who's hitting g6 here. The white knights are attacking d5 also. So probably provoking f3 before you grab the bishop, and then what? Maybe white can even take with the queen here. Because then you have dual threats against the d pawn and maybe against g6 also. So rather than forcing the issue here by taking on d3, black keeps the d5 pawn covered. But it seems like white has a decent position here to work with. You could go rook c1, protecting the c pawn and anticipating an opening of the c file. Hi there, Zaraza. Do we have any more viewers? Welcome, everybody. So this is why white wants to take here on f6, because the black position becomes a little bit rigid, not so easy to push the pawns forward. So the d5 pawn is hanging, but after you take there several times you can take on h2 as black and then pick up the knight. An interesting piece sacrifice here. This bishop on g7 is caught behind the pawns. So this trade for black seems good. The last couple of moves, black has improved his position. The knight is active here on f5, whereas this bishop is passively defending the pawn on e3. Is someone else having problems with the sound? Okay. Because it does seem as if my mic is working. Oh, no problem. And I'm wondering if you just take here on f4, the pawns are shattered, although the dark squares could be weak here. So white picks up a pawn here just to it's a pseudo sacrifice. Lots of options here for black. He could go for the queen sacrifice, taking on f4. Indeed he does so. White will take on d5, and if the knight takes back, yeah, black has something else in mind. He doesn't waste time taking on d5, instead he launches an attack. If white takes here, black takes, and he can take on f2, and all of a sudden it's really, really weak around the white king. So you could take on d4 maybe. That saves the knight and also opens up a hole here on e3 if white takes back. So black is probing for weaknesses here. Yeah, I agree there, Gingerbread. A lot of pressure here around the white king, but notice that white does have a material advantage, although not a big one. Black would like to take the important defender here on f4. Strong initiative here for black. Has a lot of threats, a lot of possibilities to push forward. If you take here on f4, well, h4 is hanging with check, f3 will be hanging, and maybe it's time to simply do take on e3, yeah, just to open up everything here. Lots of trades coming. You can take g4 as well. And notice that the white pieces in hand, they're just building up, piling up. This closes the exit, so the white king cannot move to the e-file anymore. Black is threatening pawn here, bishop here, or, well, diag, and its mate. So you don't have the time to take on g5. Doganswer struggling to stay alive. And this will cost a ton of material. The queen trade. The queen is ready for g2 or d2 or somewhere. Super nasty attack here by Doganswer. Just building up his attack like a boa constrictor. And he's forcing the mate. And a rook on h2 is mate. Wow. Very nice attack there by Catask. Yeah, it was a very positional build-up in that attack. I'm really curious here. How does doganswer play against this opening? Apparently he has something prepared. Black cannot afford to trade on e5 and trade queens because the pawn will land on h6 and will be mate pretty soon. So instead he gives up a whole piece for a pawn. But it's hard to make use of the e-file because it's always scary with a piece sacrifice on f7 followed by knight checks on g5. So the g4 pawn is trying to disturb the white coordination here. h4 doesn't look like a very good square, but neither did e1, and you need to have d4 protected. Maybe you can play f5 here, because that hits the knight and also d4 is threatened. I don't really get this move, it's just way too slow, I think. Or is he preparing to play g5 and trap the knight on h4? Not very clear what this was. I would say, yeah, knight h6, try to take with the bishop, and then maybe take with the rook here on e7 and play knight d5. And white is simply quicker here. And notice that catask is restricting black, so he doesn't have enough to start an attack here. In fact, he only has a knight in hand. And how on earth is black going to prevent bishop g7 followed by rook h8? Well, maybe there are too many interesting chess broadcasts going on right now, I'm not sure. Yeah, catask can do anything he likes. e7 is hanging also. I was thinking instead of checking here you could have even taken, or could you? Maybe, yeah. Oh, never mind. Everything is hanging. Catask making use of the whole board here, building up pressure here against the knight on f7 and threatening mate on e7. So, not a very interesting position here. I don't know why he doesn't simply resign. Because everything is coming with check and white just has too much material here. Okay, 2-0. And you cannot experiment too much against catask. I mean, you need to randomize a little bit, but that was stretching it too far. I saw doganswer playing this earlier in this tournament. Quick h4, and this time catask chose a more ambitious kingside fianchetto shadow setup with the pawn at g5 rather than g6. Yeah, you're right. He missed a forced mate there. That's correct. But I remember discussing this before in this tournament. If you find a winning move, you don't really calculate anymore. But maybe he should have stopped and thought a little more there, and found the. He would have found the forced mate. So clearly White would like to trade these guys. The problem with the early h4 is that where does White put his king? You took on c6 and now the b file is open, so castling long isn't looking very comfortable either. And if you castle short, you would like to go back with the pawn. So instead he pushes the h pawn, hoping maybe to get a pawn for g6 at some point. And he did find a pawn here, but now he's weak also here on the dark squares. And to be quite frank, this doesn't threaten very much. Black might consider checking on d2 with the pawn and then place the knight on c3, trapping the white queen. The question is, does Black have the time to do so? Knight at c3, pawn takes here, rook takes, pawn g6, rook somewhere. And White doesn't have a pawn in hand. Yeah, he does go for the queen here, and he spent a lot of time just calculating, making sure White doesn't have anything here. And notice that as soon as Black takes here, there's a mating threat on e1 as well. Yeah, you're probably right there, Opper. So, what if White takes here then? Black would like to have a knight, so he can start with, let's say, bishop here and knight check here if White takes. And this looks entirely safe. Threatening mate here with the pawn, but he doesn't have a pawn just yet. So maybe Black can do something here. Well, he simply took on f7. And how to get to the Black king? You have no diags, and now Black got the knight, so taking on g3 is not an option anymore. Black trying to starve white here. He could pick up a pawn here on c6, but that would give... Okay, he picks up a pawn for f7, but now he spent his rook. Yeah, you can just take on f1 because you have king h7. And still nothing that can hurt black, who might try to take here on f2. Is it a forced mate? Yes, it is. So mate coming soon, and white just resigns. 3-0 catask. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't realized it yet, I always save my streams first on Twitch and then on YouTube also. So they will be there for an eternity. So this is interesting. d4 could be hanging if black played pawn at g4. I'm wondering what catask had in store for pawn at g4. Yes, as Yasugi points out here, catask is in tremendous form. But you know what, Yasugi? I think you have the game that can hurt catask. Just pay close attention to what Zixon did against him, and I think you can maybe come up with a few lines that could potentially hurt catask. Aggressive play here by catask. I was thinking maybe he should have played bishop at c5, because if black takes here, you have bishop takes f5. Would it be nice to place another piece on the board? Maybe bishop c5 now. Or now, maybe. Bishop c5. Indeed, bishop c5 comes. Now there's a target on d4. So let's say queen d7, you can play pawn d5 maybe and simply pick up the pawn on d4. Catask is super safe all the time around his king. And lots of diagonals and open lines here where he can become aggressive. And this is just awful. I mean, white could place a pawn here on d7 maybe. Maybe he should have done that so already. Keeping everything under control here. Placing his pieces with tempo the whole time. Black is struggling to find squares for his pieces. And this little move opens a breach in the black defense. So it doesn't matter if the knight takes or the king takes. Probably white will play pawn e6. Just luring the king further out on the board. And then you get this knight, maybe bishop f4 take on e5. Of course this is a good move as well. And if king d8, you can simply take on e5, so you need to go in this direction. And pawns here will decide matters. Oh well. Catask just keeps on checking and checking and checking and checking. Everything comes with check. He's like a necromancer, just building an army of undead. Every enemy he strikes down joins his army, and there is no way doganswer can stop this attack. And this isn't funny anymore. Okay, 4-0. I felt sorry for doganswer there in the end. Catask having a little bit of fun. Doganswer mixing things up a little bit. Maybe he will go for the kingside fianchetto. No, instead they play a symmetrical line. And maybe black has achieved something already by taking with the c-pawn here. I rather like this idea. You get a lot of control in the center and you have an open c-file where you can put your rook. Somehow, black just seems to have a lot of natural moves all the time. He knows just what to do. Protecting the d6 pawn. Well, maybe just trade on g3. Okay, so if white takes here, you just take back. Protecting d6 once again. And one idea might be to swing this knight over. Maybe take there and put the knight on f5. The knight on c3 is not making a great impression. I don't like the queen d2 move at all because it's tactically weak. You have the e4 square and sometimes you have the f3 square forking here. This is just tactically bad for white, I think. The piece is coming with tempo here. You could protect with bishop a6 maybe. Because white doesn't have a pawn here for b5. It only has a knight and a rook. So whenever black likes, he can pick up a heavy. Also knight d2 might be a problem. So the queen d2 move there by white is very problematic. Bishop c4 maybe. We could trade first. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe white needed to sacrifice his queen anyway, but I thought bishop c4 first looked good. And once again, he's just untouchable. Surely knight f5 now. I was thinking knight f5 just to make something out of the knight, an opening for the queen. Hard to get to the black king here. The knight is protecting g8 and the bishop is protecting f7, so there's definitely no smothered mate. Black would like to have a pawn here for f2. This is just mocking white. Actually, this is starting to look a little bit cumbersome for black. Maybe he was a bit careless. So he can pick up e1 with check. But this looks like white is simply caught in a mating net. And the queen can go to f5. So you need to put something heavy here on. Okay, unless you want to get mated. 5-0. And playing black against catask is not so easy. So black a little tactically weak here on f5 and d5. White is looking to play something maybe like knight takes d5 and then take on f5. Just a lot of pressure here from these bishops. And sometimes you just take on d5 and then bishop e6 check. I'm not sure why that didn't work here. Let's say in this position, if you take here, black takes, bishop e6 check, and you pick up f5. I would have won a pawn, but white is just keeping the pressure. But I'm not sure he's getting anywhere. So what do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, this is probably a good move. The rook could go to g1 at some point, protecting g2. Yeah, Opera seems to agree with me. This isn't as good as it was before. But here doganswer simply blundered a whole rook, and you cannot afford that against catask or any player for that matter. So not only did it blunder a rook, but if you take here, rook c8 is coming. Yeah, just take b7, you can take d5, you have threat strike like rook at c8. This was probably a bit unnecessary. Stänger du dörren snällt? A bit unnecessary, but still winning, of course. I mean, d5 is hanging also. Was hanging, but now e8 is hanging. So, resigns. Let's have a quick look at the position I was mentioning before. This seemed like a prepared line. And here, indeed, you can take on d5 with a healthy extra pawn. So instead, it's doganswer who provokes f6 here. Catask leading 6-0. He's playing some sort of a copycat game here, making use of the same idea that as Catask had. But Catask handles this slightly differently. Maybe the knight on h4 is just awkward now, because black could be ready to push in the center. He could also be ready to play knight g6 when knight takes, h takes. The h file is open for the black rook. A bit surprising, I think, that he chose to castle in that position. I kind of like the knight g6 idea. So white giving a piece here for a pawn and some unclear compensation. But this is one of the problems with the knight on e7, because it does weaken the dark squares. And now the attack is something to be reckoned with. Threatening to take on f6 with a double check. Not so easy to take care of. And if white gets his hands on a knight, e6, check would fork just about every piece. Yeah, this is looking good here for... Yeah, e6 was hanging in this position here. He could have taken on e6 if he wanted to. So maybe rook at h7. But then the king goes here maybe. Rook h7, because if you play rook at h7, if black interposes, you can take on g7 at any point. This opens up the e6 square if black takes, so you can play pawn at e6. What if you take with the queen then? So this is maybe clever, because you can... If black takes on g4, you probably take on g8 and then you fork on h6 and take back. A lot to count on here. What if you take the queen? White needs to be careful, because once the queen falls, it could be like check check. If black gets another knight, a couple of knight checks could actually mate white. Careful here, because you cannot go to e8 because of pawn f7. You need to go to f8. Maybe play rook c8. There is a check here on e7. How is catask going to save this? I guess one answer would be, we'll see. So he picked up the knight. Now black does have a mating attack. Once he gets the chance, he will have a mating attack. So can he find a safe square here on d7? Yeah, I think just putting a diagonal e7 was strong, and maybe doganswer messed this up, because d7 does look safe. And now black has all sorts of nasty threats up his sleeve. Ooh. What do you do here? Yeah, take with the king and hope for the best. And there's a mate here. You just check here and then... No, it's not mate. The rook is covering h2. Excuse me. That rook is covering h2. So we'd see a win here by doganswer if nothing happens, like that little mess up. And okay. Damn. Let's have a look there. How bad was it? Was it minus 50 for catask, or looking from no, this is the wrong game. Sorry. And this is the wrong game also. Okay, never mind. Why doesn't it show up? Doganswer catask. This has to be the game. So white is plus 30 here. And simply checking on e7 indeed is plus 41. Instead it shows a weaker continuation, allowing black to survive a few moves. Taking on g7 is made in rook f7. Okay. Yeah, rook f7. Knight b8, cute little move. Knight b8 is made in 3. And everything wins here except taking on e5. Oh well. So let's get back to the game. And did they already finish a game? Let's have a look. And this is looking like old prep. Yeah. So catask won. Doganswer didn't even have the chance to get out of book in that game. Everything went wrong for black in that game. So it's 8-0 catask. And this could very well be the quickest game, quickest match I've live streamed so far. And that's the thing, you don't get many chances, but when you do get the chances, you do need to take them. Because they won't come back. Yeah, well, this will be over within the hour, I think. The f4 move is creating some scope for the rook, but also weakens e3 a little bit. But I kind of like this idea. Because if black takes here, you open up the f file. And now you probably just take on g6. Take on g6, just demolish the black defense. And f5 might be coming here. For instance, maybe not now, or maybe now. Yeah, because g4 is hanging. You take with the rook here, and then take on g4. I'm not sure about this, but could be good. Aha, you do this way instead. But pawn at f2 looks nasty. So he wants to pick up the rook with check. That's the idea. And then g4 will be hanging as well. But this way, you don't give white the chance to pick up the rook with check. So if white takes here, you have pawn f2. And everything under control here for black. Absolutely nothing is threatening. This knight is just covering the black king. So black has all the time in the world to build up an unstoppable attack, threatening rook f2. And the position just looks resignable. There are other strong moves too, maybe bishop c4, setting up discovered checks. I would have saved that knight, that rook for later, but because that's the thing with heavies. You want to place them, usually want to place them on the board when it's mate or when you do win a lot of material. But of course it's annoying for white to have that rook in the vicinity of the king. 9-0 catask. Let's have a quick look at the position there. Was it so bad for doganswer? I thought he was doing fine here, but maybe he wasn't. Queen g4 is an option here for white, but black still seems to be better. But here maybe queen takes g4? No. Maybe. Queen takes g4. Yeah. I bet Jan Lee would have played it instantly. Because this was just bad for black. So we will be watching the last game of the match. And let's look at it from the beginning. Symmetrical, very symmetrical position here. Black breaks the symmetry and gives white a chance to put something on e5. So what is happening here? Maybe knight at d4 is the move. Because then you're attacking c6, and also you can trade on f5 anytime you like. h5 is another great square for a knight. And black playing h5 blocks any attempt by white to put a knight on h5. And speaking of blocking, white should probably put something on h4. And if black puts his bishop here, you take on e7 and put the next bishop on h4. Curious attempt here would be to take on f2, because if the bishop takes, you can take on h4. So catask was prepared for this. And now everything comes with check. Picking up another pawn, threatening the rook, threatening pawn at e7, and this is over again. And white doesn't even have to put his pawn on e7, he can simply queen on d8. Winning even more material. Oh, we can take on h8 with check now. And doganswer resigns. Okay. This was a cat eat dog match. Very impressive display by Catask, who was in danger of losing, well, at least one game. But so many games where he just walked all over doganswer. Just let's have a quick look again at the game we never saw. So, and from the beginning, this was the 8th game, and it was over before we had a chance to watch it. Exactly. So, doganswer chose a fianchetto setup here, and Catask quickly trading the knight on f6 and attacking the d5 pawn, attacking g6, exchanging on f5, attacking f5 and g6, cutting off the king with the bishop, so no castling. And also there's a weakness here on d6. And probably Well, g5 wasn't the best move because it weakens the king side so much. And now catask makes use of the whole board and puts a bishop on g8. And it's all over. Little check here, picking up the queen, and it's made in a couple of moves. Very impressive. So I don't know if they updated the standings. Let's find out. Catask versus doganswer. No, they haven't. But if we count how many matches he had remaining, that means he now has 5 matches remaining. He is facing number 2, Jan Lee, later on. I think it's the last round game. He will be playing Blitzbullet, hopefully next weekend, and also he has his match against the finisher left. You notice that the finisher hasn't played many matches. But he will also play variants only and Mary Orton, where I'm sure he'll build up a nice little game percentage. So